I remember the first time I laid eyes on the Hinsdale house. It was a chilly autumn afternoon, and the sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape. The house stood alone at the end of a gravel road, its weathered exterior and broken windows giving it a sinister, unwelcoming presence. I could feel a chill run down my spine, a sense of foreboding that seemed to seep from the very walls of the old house. I had heard the stories, of course. Everyone in the small town of Hinsdale, New York, knew about the haunted house at the edge of the woods. They spoke in hushed tones about ghostly apparitions, mysterious voices, and even physical attacks on those brave or foolish enough to spend the night. Some claimed the house was cursed, a place where the veil between our world and the afterlife was dangerously thin. But being a seasoned paranormal investigator, I was more intrigued than frightened. The opportunity to explore such a notorious site was too compelling to pass up. As I approached the house, my footsteps crunching on the gravel, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. I reached for the old, rusted doorknob and hesitated, feeling a sudden urge to turn back. But curiosity and a sense of duty pushed me forward. I had come too far to retreat now. The door creaked open with a reluctant groan, revealing a dark, musty interior. The air inside was stale, tinged with the scent of decay and something else I couldn't quite place. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The wooden floorboards creaked under my weight, echoing through the empty rooms. I could see remnants of the past scattered around, old furniture covered in dust, faded photographs on the walls, and cobwebs hanging from the ceiling like spectral curtains. I decided to start my investigation in the living room, a large space dominated by an old, ornate fireplace. As I set up my equipment, cameras, EMF meters, and digital recorders, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I chalked it up to nerves and continued with my work. The first few hours passed uneventfully, with no signs of the paranormal activity I had hoped to document. It wasn't until I began my EVP session that things took a turn for the strange. I asked the usual questions, hoping to elicit a response from whatever spirits might be lingering in the house. "Is there anyone here with me?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty room. I waited, listening intently. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then, faintly, I heard it, a whisper so soft I almost missed it. "Leave." I played back the recording, my heart pounding as I listened again. There it was, unmistakable. A voice, not my own, urging me to leave. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This was no trick of the mind or equipment malfunction. Something was indeed in the house with me. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I pressed on. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear creeping in. This time, the response was immediate and chilling. "Get out." A sudden, intense cold enveloped the room, and the temperature dropped drastically. I could see my breath misting in the air, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. My equipment began to malfunction, the EMF meter spiking erratically and the cameras glitching. The sense of being watched intensified, and I could feel an unseen presence closing in around me. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl coming from the shadows. My flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, I saw it, a figure, shrouded in shadow, standing at the edge of the room. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and a sense of pure, unadulterated evil radiated from it. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet. The figure advanced, its form shifting and flickering like a mirage. I scrambled to my feet and bolted for the door, my heart racing. As I fled the house, I could hear the voice again, louder and more insistent. "Leave and never return." I didn't stop running until I was back at my car, gasping for breath. I looked back at the house, now shrouded in darkness, and knew that I had only scratched the surface of the horrors that lay within. The Hinsdale house had revealed its malevolent nature, and I was left with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear, I couldn't let fear stop me. I would return, better prepared, to uncover the secrets of the Hinsdale house. The investigation had only just begun. A week later, armed with new equipment and a team of fellow investigators, I returned to the Hinsdale house. The foreboding sense of dread had not diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger. My team consisted of Mark, a tech expert, Lisa, a medium with a keen sensitivity to spirits, and Tom, a skeptic who believed there was a logical explanation for everything. We arrived just as dusk was settling in, casting long shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Mark began setting up our gear, infrared cameras, motion detectors, and an array of audio recorders. Lisa closed her eyes, her face a mask of concentration as she tried to tune into the house's energies. Tom, arms crossed and unimpressed, muttered under his breath about how this was all a waste of time. "All right, team," I said, trying to mask my own apprehension. "Let's get started." We split into pairs. Mark and Lisa took the upstairs, while Tom and I explored the ground floor. The house was even colder than I remembered, and every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo with a sinister undertone. Tom, armed with a thermal camera, scanned the rooms for any signs of unusual heat patterns. Meanwhile, I focused on documenting our surroundings, taking photographs and making notes. As we moved from room to room, the atmosphere grew heavier, more oppressive. In the kitchen, Tom's thermal camera picked up a sudden spike in temperature. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the screen. "There's a hot spot here, but no source for it." I took a closer look. The shape was roughly human-sized, but distorted, like a figure seen through rippling water. A chill ran down my spine. "Let's keep moving," I said, my voice steady. "We'll review the footage later." In the living room, where I had my first encounter, the air was thick with tension. The fireplace loomed ominously, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I set up an EVP session, placing a recorder on the mantel. "If there's anyone here, please speak to us," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, there was silence. Then, faintly, a voice echoed back, captured by the recorder. "Help me." Tom's eyes widened. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his skepticism wavering. I nodded, my heart pounding. "Let's see if we can get more." We continued our session, asking questions and receiving fragmented, haunting responses. Each answer seemed to paint a picture of a trapped, tormented spirit, desperate for release. The more we delved, the more the house seemed to come alive around us. Shadows moved in the corners of our vision, and the air grew colder with each passing minute. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from upstairs, followed by a scream. "Lisa!" I shouted, racing for the stairs with Tom close behind. We found Mark and Lisa in the master bedroom, both pale and shaken. A large, heavy dresser had toppled over, narrowly missing them. "It just fell," Mark stammered. "We weren't even near it." Lisa, clutching her pendant, looked more disturbed than ever. "There's something here," she said, her voice trembling. "Something angry." Before I could respond, a cold wind whipped through the room, slamming the door shut behind us. The lights flickered, and the temperature plummeted. We were trapped, surrounded by an unseen force that seemed intent on driving us out. "Everyone, stay calm," I said, trying to keep my own fear in check. "We need to stay together and get out of here." As we made our way to the door, it suddenly burst open, revealing the shadowy figure from my previous visit. Its eyes burned with malevolence, and a guttural growl filled the room. We backed away, the oppressive presence pushing us toward the window. With no other option, we climbed out onto the roof and made our way down to the ground. As we fled the property, I could hear the voice again, echoing in my mind. "Leave. And never return." We reached the safety of our car, breathless and shaken. As we drove away, I looked back at the Hinsdale house, now just a dark silhouette against the night sky. This time, I knew we had encountered something far more dangerous than mere spirits. The Hinsdale house held secrets that were not meant to be uncovered, and we had barely escaped with our lives. But the investigation wasn't over. I was more determined than ever to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The Hinsdale house had become a personal challenge, a mystery I was determined to solve. As we regrouped and reviewed our findings, I couldn't shake the feeling that our encounters were only the beginning. The Hinsdale house had many more secrets to reveal, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The investigation would continue, but this time, we would be prepared for anything. The Hinsdale house was not just haunted, it was a gateway to something far more sinister, and I was determined to uncover its darkest secrets. After our second encounter at the Hinsdale house, I knew we needed more information. Something about the house's history might explain the intense paranormal activity we experienced. I spent the next few days combing through local archives, old newspapers, and historical records, hoping to find clues. What I discovered was both fascinating and chilling. The house had a long and troubled past, filled with tragedy and unexplained events. Built in the early 1800s, it had changed hands many times, each new owner leaving under mysterious or violent circumstances. There were stories of disappearances, sudden deaths, and even rumors of occult rituals conducted on the property. One particular event stood out: the disappearance of the Donovan family in the 1970s. They had moved into the house hoping for a fresh start, but their stay was short-lived. Neighbors reported hearing screams and strange noises coming from the house at night. Then, one day, the family simply vanished. Their belongings were left behind, and there were no signs of a struggle. The house had been abandoned ever since, earning its reputation as a place of evil. With this new information, I called a meeting with my team. "We need to approach this investigation differently," I said, spreading out the documents I had collected. "The Hinsdale House isn't just haunted. There's a history of violence and possibly dark rituals that we need to understand." Lisa looked at the old photographs and newspaper clippings, her expression grim. "No wonder the spirits are so restless," she said. "If rituals were performed here, they might have opened a doorway to something sinister." Mark nodded. "We need to be careful. Whatever we're dealing with, it's powerful and dangerous." Tom, ever the skeptic, sighed. "I still think there's a logical explanation. Maybe the house is built on unstable ground, or there's a gas leak causing hallucinations." "Maybe," I conceded, "but we can't ignore the evidence of the paranormal. We need to be prepared for anything." We decided to return to the Hinsdale house one last time, armed with the knowledge we had gained and additional protective measures. Lisa suggested a cleansing ritual to try and calm the spirits, while Mark worked on enhancing our equipment to withstand the interference we had previously encountered. The night before our return, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the Donovan family and the horrors they must have faced. I knew we were stepping into a dangerous situation, but I also felt a responsibility to uncover the truth and possibly help the trapped spirits find peace. As dawn broke, we gathered our gear and set out for the Hinsdale house. The drive was tense, each of us lost in our thoughts. When we arrived, the house looked even more menacing than before, as if it were aware of our intentions and preparing to resist. We entered cautiously, the air thick with tension. The atmosphere inside was as oppressive as ever, the cold seeping into our bones. Lisa immediately began her cleansing ritual, lighting sage and chanting softly. Mark set up the enhanced equipment, and Tom, despite his skepticism, kept a wary eye on our surroundings. As Lisa moved through the house, the oppressive feeling seemed to lift slightly. "It's working," she said, her voice filled with relief. "The spirits are calming." But our respite was short-lived. As we moved deeper into the house, the temperature dropped sharply, and a sense of malevolence returned. Mark's equipment began to malfunction again, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. In the basement, we found evidence of the dark rituals, strange symbols carved into the walls and remnants of candles and other ritual items. The air was thick with a sense of dread, and I could feel the presence of something ancient and angry. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the house, and the ground beneath us trembled. We rushed upstairs, only to find the shadowy figure from before standing in the hallway, blocking our path. Its eyes glowed with hatred, and a low growl filled the air. "We need to leave," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "Now." As we backed away, the figure advanced, its form shifting and flickering like a mirage. We stumbled out of the house, the oppressive presence pushing us forward. Once outside, we didn't stop until we were back at our car, breathless and shaken. As we drove away, I looked back at the Hinsdale house, now just a dark silhouette against the night sky. I knew we had barely scratched the surface of the horrors within. The house held secrets that were not meant to be uncovered, and we had only just begun to understand the true extent of its darkness. But despite the danger, I was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. The Hinsdale house had become a personal challenge, a mystery I was determined to solve. The investigation would continue, and this time, we would be prepared for anything. The Hinsdale house was not just haunted, it was a gateway to something far more sinister, and I was determined to uncover its darkest secrets. Our third visit to the Hinsdale house felt like a final showdown. We had gathered every bit of information we could find and prepared ourselves mentally and physically for what lay ahead. The house seemed to sense our resolve, looming more ominously than ever against the darkening sky. This time, we brought additional protective measures. Lisa had enlisted the help of a local shaman, who provided us with talismans and performed a protective ritual before we entered the house. Mark had upgraded our equipment to include stronger electromagnetic shields and backup power sources, while Tom had finally agreed to wear a talisman, albeit reluctantly. We entered the house in silence, each of us keenly aware of the danger. The air inside was colder than ever, and a thick fog seemed to hang in the corridors. The oppressive feeling was almost unbearable, But we pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. As we moved through the house, the shadows seemed to dance around us, whispering unintelligible words. Lisa led the way, her talisman glowing faintly. "Stay close," she warned. "The spirits are restless." We made our way to the basement, where we had found the ritual symbols. The air grew thicker with each step, and I could feel a dark presence watching us. Lisa began another cleansing ritual, her voice strong and unwavering. The rest of us formed a protective circle around her, our eyes scanning the darkness. Suddenly, the temperature dropped even further, and a loud, guttural growl echoed through the basement. The shadowy figure appeared once more, its eyes burning with malevolence. This time, it seemed more solid, more real. It advanced toward us, its form shifting and flickering like a nightmare come to life. Lisa continued her chant, her voice rising in intensity. The figure recoiled, but then advanced again, its growl turning into a roar. Mark's equipment began to spike, the readings off the charts. The shadows around us thickened, and I could feel an overwhelming sense of dread. "Hold the line," I shouted, trying to keep the fear from my voice. "Don't break the circle." The figure lunged at us, but was repelled by the talismans. It roared in anger, its form distorting violently. Lisa's chanting grew louder, and the shadows began to recede. The figure faltered, its growls turning into pained howls. In a final, desperate move, the figure lunged at Lisa, but she stood her ground, her talisman glowing brightly. With a final, piercing scream, the figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving us in stunned silence. The oppressive feeling lifted, and the air grew warmer. We had confronted the dark presence and survived. Lisa's cleansing ritual had worked, at least for now. The house felt different, less hostile. We had made progress, but I knew the battle wasn't over. As we packed up our equipment, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only just begun to uncover the true nature of the Hinsdale House. There were still secrets hidden within its walls, and I was determined to find them. The drive back was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts. We had faced something truly terrifying and lived to tell the tale. But the Hinsdale House was not done with us yet. There were still many questions left unanswered, and I was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. Our investigation would continue, and this time, we would be even more prepared. The Hinsdale House was a gateway to something far more sinister, and I was determined to uncover its darkest secrets. The battle was far from over, but we were ready to face whatever came next. In the days that followed our third visit to the Hinsdale House, I became obsessed with uncovering its mysteries. The house had awakened something within me, a relentless drive to understand the forces at play and put an end to the darkness that resided there. I spent countless hours researching similar hauntings and dark rituals. I spoke with other paranormal investigators, historians, and even occult experts. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, revealing a chilling picture. The rituals performed at the Hinsdale House were not merely for summoning spirits, they were designed to open a gateway to another realm, a realm of malevolent entities. With this new knowledge, I called another meeting with my team. "We need to go back," I said, my voice resolute. "We need to close the gateway once and for all." Lisa looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you sure? We've barely escaped with our lives each time." "I know," I replied. "But we can't leave it like this. If we don't do something, others might suffer the same fate as the Donovan family." Mark nodded in agreement. "We need to do this right. We need a plan." Tom, ever the skeptic, finally seemed to accept the gravity of the situation. "All right," he said. "But this time, we go in fully prepared. No half measures." We spent the next week planning our return. Lisa consulted with the shaman, who provided us with additional protective measures and a detailed ritual to close the gateway. Mark upgraded our equipment even further, ensuring we had multiple backups and fail-safes. Tom, now fully on board, helped devise a strategic layout for our gear and personnel. When the day finally arrived, the air was thick with anticipation. We drove to the Hinsdale House in silence, each of us lost in our thoughts. The house loomed before us, a dark silhouette against the stormy sky. It felt like the calm before the storm, a final test of our resolve. We entered the house as a united front, the oppressive atmosphere greeting us once more. We moved quickly, setting up our equipment and forming a protective circle in the basement. Lisa began the ritual, her voice strong and unwavering. As the ritual progressed, the temperature dropped sharply, and the shadows around us thickened. The malevolent presence grew stronger, pushing against our protective circle. Mark's equipment began to spike, and a loud, guttural growl echoed through the basement. The shadowy figure appeared once more, its eyes burning with hatred. This time, it was accompanied by other dark shapes, flickering and shifting in the darkness. They advanced toward us, but our protective measures held them at bay. Lisa's chanting grew louder, her voice filling the room. The talismans glowed brightly, and the shadows recoiled, their forms distorting violently. The ground beneath us trembled, and a deafening roar filled the air. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the center of our circle, enveloping the room. The malevolent presence howled in pain, its form disintegrating in the light. The shadows dissolved, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. When the light faded, the basement was silent. The air was warm, and a sense of peace settled over us. We had done it. We had closed the gateway and banished the dark presence from the Hinsdale house. As we packed up our equipment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief and accomplishment. We had faced our fears and emerged victorious. The Hinsdale house, once a place of darkness and terror, now felt different, almost serene. The drive back was filled with a sense of camaraderie and triumph. We had uncovered the darkest secrets of the Hinsdale house and put an end to its malevolent influence. But as I looked back at the house one last time, I couldn't shake the feeling that our journey wasn't entirely over. There were still mysteries to uncover, and the world of the paranormal held many more challenges for us to face. The Hinsdale house had been our greatest test, but it had also prepared us for whatever lay ahead. And I knew, deep down, that we were ready to face whatever came next. Several months had passed since we closed the gateway at the Hinsdale house. Life seemed to return to normal, but the memories of our encounters there stayed with me, haunting my dreams. Despite the sense of accomplishment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was left unresolved. One evening, as I was reviewing our old case files, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from an elderly woman named Margaret, who claimed to be a distant relative of the Donovans. She had seen our reports and needed to speak with us urgently. Curiosity piqued, I arranged a meeting with Margaret at a local cafe. She arrived, frail but determined, carrying a worn leather journal. "This belonged to my great-aunt," she said, handing me the journal. She was the last Donovan to live in the house before they disappeared. I opened the journal, its pages filled with detailed entries about the family's life in the Hinsdale house. As I read, a chilling narrative unfolded. The journal described strange occurrences, escalating from harmless pranks to terrifying encounters with malevolent entities. The final entries hinted at the discovery of an ancient artifact buried in the house, a relic of great power, connected to the dark rituals performed there. Margaret pointed to the last page, where her great-aunt had written in a shaky hand, "The artifact must be destroyed to break the curse. It lies beneath the old oak tree." Armed with this new information, I called the team back together. We returned to the Hinsdale house one final time, determined to find the artifact and end the curse once and for all. The house, though still eerie, felt less hostile than before. It was as if it knew this was our final confrontation. We made our way to the old oak tree mentioned in the journal, its gnarled branches casting twisted shadows in the moonlight. Digging carefully around the roots, we unearthed a small, ornate box. Inside was a strange, ancient artifact, a dark crystal that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Lisa, sensing the artifact's power, began a purification ritual while Mark and I prepared to destroy it. As Lisa chanted, the crystal's pulsing grew more intense, and the ground beneath us trembled. Shadows began to gather, but our protective measures held them at bay. With a final, powerful chant, Lisa completed the ritual. Mark and I brought the hammer down on the crystal, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. A deafening roar filled the air, and the shadows around us dissipated, leaving a profound silence. The oppressive atmosphere lifted completely, replaced by a sense of calm and peace. We had done it. The curse was broken, and the dark presence banished for good. As we packed up our gear for the last time, I felt a sense of closure. The Hinsdale house, once a place of terror and darkness, could now rest in peace. We had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged victorious, stronger and more united than ever. The drive back was filled with relief and camaraderie. We had not only uncovered the secrets of the Hinsdale house but had also laid to rest the spirits trapped there. Our journey had been long and perilous, but it had prepared us for whatever challenges lay ahead. The Hinsdale house had been our greatest test, but it had also given us the strength and determination to face the unknown. And as we drove away, I knew that we were ready for whatever came next. The world of the paranormal held many more mysteries, and we were prepared to uncover them, one by one.